I've never intended for this to become an Arthurian legend themed channel, but now I'm already on my second video about it, so Half Sick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian is a YA fantasy novel that came out this year, in which Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, Morgana, and Elaine are all the same age and grew up together, and Arthur's ascent to the throne of Camelot is only possible through their collaborative use of a variety of magical abilities. Elaine has an ability that allows her to not really see the future, but to envision the full set of possible futures and their relative probabilities, allowing her to advise and deceive others towards the optimal path. This book deviates from the other versions of the King Arthur story a lot, most notably in the personalities of its main characters. In previous versions, especially T.H. White's version, Arthur is self-driven towards becoming the incarnation of moral reason. He seeks to rule without passion or bias, as is epitomized by his decision to let Guinevere be put to death rather than intervene and save his own spouse. In The Once and Future King, he is told explicitly that everybody would accept it if he used his authority to spare her, but he refuses on the grounds that pure moral law is the only way to protect the progress of civilization. And this is just my own, queer brain at work here, but he's always seemed to me to be asexual. Besides never producing an heir, in most versions of the story, his love for Guinevere never has the heat of romantic love. Its sublime propriety and Christian virtue make it feel like Arthur chooses her to be his queen because she is a good and logical choice, not because he feels anything for her. Sebastian's version of Arthur is nothing like this. Besides truly loving Guinevere in a charming, embarrassing, and teenage fashion, he also lacks a strong moral compass of his own, instead relying heavily on his circle of advisors to direct him. And Elaine in Half Sick of Shadows bears no relevance to her counterpart in the previous literature. She goes from being a pining side character to a narrator and earthshaker. Her control over the narrative is not just stylistic, but diegetic. She sees the possible paths of the future and instructs the other characters on how to choose them. There are definitely points reading this book where I wondered why Laura Sebastian had even bothered to use the Arthurian mythos for narrative capital at all. Some of the best elements of the story, from the coming-of-age flashbacks to exploring the psychological consequences of Elaine's gift, are all original elements. In the Morgana is always bad, and how she came to be that way is not relevant to the story, and Sebastian's decision to create a plot arc about a character who is loving and devoted, but must face the fact that they are destined to become evil and hurt those they love, is thus not reliant upon that character being Morgana Le Fay. Taking that unprecedented character arc and forcing it onto a character for whom it is completely foreign serves a point of its own. Because while reading, I also found myself thinking about this book as a sort of revenge story for Elaine and Morgana. Elaine's powerlessness to her love for Lancelot in other versions of the story is completely reversed. The changes in their personalities for this novel make it possible for her to dictate the terms of their relationship. Similarly, Arthur is reduced from the unyielding and morally upright king who is handed his throne unquestionably by God to an awkward youth who is uncertain of himself and in need of Elaine's guidance. Morgana is also made into an essential element of his entourage, and the decisions of these two women often dictate the course of Arthur's journey more than he does. And I like that the three female leads in the story are not entirely spared the suffering of their counterparts in other versions. This novel's plot is still grim, and there is little joy for its protagonists. Elaine's ability to see that grim future mirrors the perspective of a reader familiar with the nature of the Arthurian legend. It is called the death of Arthur. It must be a tragedy. To change that, to completely free Elaine and Morgana and the others from their tragedies, would be disingenuous. Being a strong, independent woman doesn't mean bad things stop happening to you, any more than being a strong, independent anything causes bad things to stop happening to you. But rather than leave them to their medieval powerlessness, Sebastian gives her female heroes, especially Elaine, the opportunity to choose to rise to meet their unfortunate destinies, and in doing so allots them the dignity of making the best of their tragic lives. In the end, the uneasy peace between the female characters and the promise that Arthur may be healed and they may collectively overcome the arc of self-destruction in Britain's populace manages to, with modern style, reflect the hopeful but realistic message of the previous incarnations of this story.